Okay. So last exam here is just our local government chapter that we're in, right? So starts tomorrow at midnight, right? So we'll is there, yes, there's only one quiz because there's only one chapter, right? Um, so uh, tomorrow that and the test will be only over the one chapter here, right? Chapter 10, local government. Um, it will be a little shorter, yes, but it's still going to be approximately the same number of points because I bumped the points up on it. So you got less to study, right? Get out there and knock it out. Because remember, this originally a unit had two chapters in it, and because of snowpocalypse, we trimmed one chapter out. So uh, focus on just this local government, right? That's what the test is over. So that's starting tomorrow, goes through the 13th. Starting on the 14th is your replacement exam, right? Which is on Friday, and slash makeup exam. So if you've missed an exam, take the exam. It'll come open, right? If you haven't missed an exam, it's up to you to decide whether you want to take that exam or not. You don't have to. I would encourage everybody to take it because it can't hurt you if it's a replacement exam. So what's going on there? It's all essay. Um, there are four sections on that essay exam. Each section has two questions. That section corresponds to the unit here on the syllabus. So there's a section on the exam that corresponds to unit one. There are two questions in that section that are going to be between, Texas history, Constitution, and federalism. You will answer one. Then you'll go to the section two, and you will answer one. And you'll go to section three. You will answer one. So you're going to see four sections, each section having two questions, 8 total questions. You're going to answer one question from each section, right? Answering four questions. Um, don't do two from the same section, right? I'll only grade one. Right? So, in that sense, it's a comprehensive exam, and that means that if you're taking it as a makeup, you're going to have an essay question over the test that you missed, and you'll have others to answer as well, right? If it's a replacement exam, then you'll answer one from each section, and if it's better than any of your previous four exams, I will swap it out. If it's not better, I will throw it out, so it can't hurt you, right? If it's a makeup exam, right? You want it because it's points. Everything, right? The way the class is set up, getting points is what is important, not what the grade associated with that points endeavor is. So you just want to get points, right? Um, if you want to know what you're going to get in the class, right? After you've taken all your exams, or after you've taken the fourth exam, sorry, go look at your total points in Blackboard and compare it to this chart. And whatever number you have, where it falls in, is the grade that you're going to get. Then you can decide whether to take the replacement exam if you want, right? If you look on there and your total points is 307, you've got an A. Don't waste your time on the replacement exam, right? If you've got a 300 and you've got a test that is middle to low that you think you could do better, go take that replacement exam. And if you make up those, what did I say, 300, you make up those 6 points, you do 6 points better on the replacement exam, you'll get the bump to A, right? So if you don't do better, then it won't matter. You'll just stay where you're at. Um, and obviously, if you're taking it as the makeup, you need to get in there and take it and get as many points as you can off of it. So you're not going to see, it's going to take me right up until grades are due to finish grading the replacement exam. But you'll know where you stand, right, after you take the fourth exam just by looking at the total points in Blackboard. and then you can make a call what you want to do from there. Does that make sense? All good. So, all right. So let's get back to what we're doing here, and let's get our slides up and make sure we cover the material we need to cover today. So I've got us finishing 24 last time, slide 24, which was rules for annexation. So we've finished this slide, but I'm going to cover it again real quick because the next slide is a continuation, right? So what we're talking about here is when cities are trying to get land to grow, the rules that are in place by the state that govern how they do that, right? How you play the game of annexation. So the first rule is that you can only annex a total of 10% of your existing city limits per year. You can bank those for 3 years. So if you don't do any annexation in the third year, you can do 30%. So you're still getting the same amount. You're doing that because you want to get a big chunk all at one time. That's probably all the same chunk, right, of land. There is a rule that your annexation has to be contiguous to your current city limits, meaning it has to touch, right? You can't go grab a piece of land out in West Texas and say, hey, that's part of Austin. There has to be land going all the way out there that belongs to Austin first. There is a requirement that the city, when it annexes territory, provides the same services to that annexed area that it provides to all of the rest of the folks living in the city, right? Generally, the rule is 2.5 years you need to get those services out there. Special circumstances can push that out a couple more years. And in front of all of this is that a city has to be transparent about where they're going to go. They have to put a plan out there that says in 3 years, we're doing this. This is our plan. Now, they don't have to do it, right? But they can't do it before then. So what they're doing is they're basically putting a public notice out there of here's where we're going, right? And so everybody knows that's interested in looking where the city's trying to expand and can start making their own decisions and projections or whatever. In that plan, there is an inventory made of what they're going to push out there, right? So and what's already there. So they look at the annexed area and they say, okay, you've already got a water distribution system. You've already got a combined sewer system. And so they're going to start then looking ahead of time to say, can we plug directly into that? Can our distribution system and your distribution system marry up? How easy is this transition going to be as far as services go? And sometimes that may be a very difficult issue, and they have some contention about it, and they have to work on it. Sometimes, right, unincorporated areas a subdivision will be built or something that's not in a city. The developer will develop it without much oversight. Maybe we generally try to extend more oversight now because we've seen problems in the past. But it's possible that, like the water distribution, right, the water pipes that are going to deliver your drinking water, the standards and the sizes and development don't match up to what City of Austin is going to push through them, and they have to look real serious at that because it can be a huge problem, right? If they have to rip all those pipes up and relay, the pipes down a different pipe that can handle different pressures, and who knows? So that 3-year period, while it serves as a public notice period, is also a period of ascertaining what the annexation is going to require to actually be successful. During that period, there have to be at least 2 public hearings, and those have to be published ahead of time, when they're going to be, where they're going to be, how people can get to them and watch them and participate. Again, trying to make sure that this is a fairly transparent process. And then finally, um, the city that's annexing, let's say they deliver five, as a city, they have five services they deliver. And the place they're going to annex has seven services. Well, they're going to have to continue providing seven services in that area they annex. They cannot lower the services that that area had prior to annexation. So in other words, they can't go in and reduce what those people already have to what they're providing everybody else. What that means long term is that all of the citizens of the city are looking at that newly annexed area going, hey, they're getting more than us. When do we get that? And there's no obligation on the city to deliver that to the pre-existing part of the city, but the public perception is going to be pretty harsh if they don't. So they got to be thinking about that, right? If we annex an area that's delivering everything we deliver plus more, we got to kind of be ready to deliver the plus more to everybody else too. And what's the cost of that going to be? And do we really want to do that? So those are the general rules that sit in place. We're going to talk now about some specialized circumstances about annexation and areas surrounding annexed cities and annexed areas. Just to kind of give you a lay of some of the things you'll run into as a citizen, especially if you're looking to buy property or something, or a house. There is this thing called the extraterritorial jurisdiction. You'll hear it referred to by city planners and by real estate folks as ETJs. And ETJs are areas around a city that are not in the city limits, but the city has extended control over that area. It can be up to 5 miles from the city limits, right? In a direction going out from the city limits. And what's been recognized is that as a city is boundaries are there, right, and they're providing services, public health services, emergency services for their city, there's areas that can be right outside the city that impact the city negatively. And a city ought to be able to protect its citizens from stuff that's just barely outside 5 miles or less of the city limits. So what I like to think about as an example of this is you've got a city, right? They've got their city limits. And let's say a concrete factory is put in, half a mile outside the city limits. Now, if you know anything about a concrete production facility, a concrete factory, right? When you're doing subdivisions and stuff, these things they pop up there. You can put them up in a week or so, right? If you've got the land, and then all the stuff is trucked in and they make concrete and truck it out. But the process is a really, really dusty process, right? It throws immense amounts of dust particles up into the air, which is not good for health, right? So they're a quarter mile outside the city limits, right? Not subject, generally speaking, to the rules of the city. They're churning out concrete to go build new subdivisions, maybe in the city or who knows where. And the wind patterns are blowing that dust into the city limits and affecting the health and welfare of the citizens. That type of situation got recognized as something where a city should have some say outside the city limits over things that are going to impact people inside the city limits. So ETJs are those areas where a city has some authority to regulate what's going on outside their city limits, up to 5 miles. And they have to justify it, and they have to say, look, this is what's happening, and you guys need to fix this because you're making people sick, right? This is a danger. And our job is to make sure that that's taken care of. And that's been legally recognized. And so you'll see ETJs around city limits. Sometimes you'll see them. I used to live in an ETJ in North Austin. And we were surrounded, basically. I think, well, Round Rock was to the north of us a little bit, and Pflugerville was to the east of us. But we were surrounded by city limits, and we were this little pocket in the middle that was belonged to nobody. But we were the ETJ of Austin, so Austin, right, had some say over what could happen there. And there was factories there and things like that, and big mining operation, and so they had some say there. And we lived in that ETJ area. Couldn't vote in city elections, but were regulated somewhat by the city on health and safety issues. And actually, we were part of Austin Water, so we were getting Austin Water and Austin sewer services where we lived, even though we weren't within the city limits. So, all right, so that's the ETJ. It's just basically an area of land that the city can extend some control over to make sure that what's going on there doesn't damage the city or the city's population. Strip annexation is a very particular form of annexation that originally was not in place, and we saw some really bizarre circumstances arise because of the way cities were annexing. So here's the example and this strip annexation was not put in place to solve this problem, but it's an example of what it was trying to solve. If you're aware, or you're right, we've got here in Northwest Austin, we have a mall, Lakeland Mall, right, which is a bonus for a city, because a big business mall like that, right, that has all these shopping opportunities raises a lot of tax money for a city. So if you see, right, a city sees that in an unincorporated area there's a developer planning to build something like a mall, well, that city wants to annex that as quick as they can, because that's going to bring a lot of money into the city, and so that might drive them to annex that direction. And a big project like a mall is going to take years, so the 3-year plan can work out and all that. And that's exactly what happened when Lakeline was there. Cedar Park and Austin both looked at that and go, yeah, we want that, right? Because the development was going to happen between them in an unincorporated area. And so they started annexing. And it was a race, right? It's literally a race between Cedar Park and Austin to see who could annex fast enough to be able to grab that property and then later get the tax monies from it. And so they were using the strip annexation rule was in place, and so this was a limit on how fast they could go, right? Because strip annexation says you've got to annex a particular width of land, right, for it to be legal. Because what had happened before is we'd see annexation of, right, 10 feet on either side of a line, right, a survey line that the city's annexing, because they've got that, right, that 10% rule. And so if you make that land real narrow, you can go way far out real quick, right? Because it's not very big, right? Width-wise, you can go longer and annex farther away from the city. And so you got these kind of virus-looking city limits, right? You got this nucleus in the center, these tendrils going out, usually along major highways where businesses were lining up. And so the cities were expanding, annexing out those highways, grabbing the businesses on each side of the highway, and that's it. Well, highway's 20, 25 feet wide. The businesses on each side may be, right, a couple hundred feet off the highway, so you're looking at 200, 300 feet maybe. And so this rule come into place saying, okay, look, that's too small. You're leaving whole chunks of areas out here that the city's growing around, and this is not really fair, because Austin can throw out, because they're so much bigger, a real long line of annexation real quick, and a small city like Cedar Park can't, because they've got smaller amount that they can grab. So the strip annexation rule says that a piece of land has to be, right, from the center point, right, you're looking at 500 feet minimum on each side of a line. So yeah, you can grab right up the highway, right? You can annex up a highway, but you're going to get 1,000 feet, right? An eighth of a mile or so at least, not an eighth of a mile, less than that. What is it? No, 5,200 feet. So 20% of a mile, right? A fifth of a mile on right across the line that you have to annex at least that wide. And whatever falls in there, you have to take, right? And when you do a strip annexation, something that's small and narrow like this, you can only grab 3.5 miles of roadway a year, regardless of how much percentage you have of land that you can grab acreage or mile wise. Roadway is going to be 3.5 miles linearly along the line. So effectively, Cedar Park, with this little rule in place, Cedar Park and Austin can both go 3.5, right? If they're big enough to get 3.5 miles, they can both go 3.5 miles a year, annexing land, trying to get to the mall sooner. Lakeline Mall is in the Austin city limits, so Cedar Park lost on that one. But these are the rules that are in place to kind of, right, give a little better competition to small cities to have an opportunity to get some good tax properties that are between cities, because it's a competition between these cities to do this, right? So this strip annexation is an interesting little limitation on how we do that. The last type of annexation we're talking about is called limited purpose annexation. And this is an exception to the rule, right? If a city is big enough, greater than 225,000 people, then they have the opportunity to annex areas for limited purposes. In other words, they're not going to be annexing them and having to deliver full services to this area. This is kind of an extended example of ETJs. This lets a city annex an area and start controlling that area versus zoning, again, health and safety like ETJ, advanced planning, right? So if you got a big city and it's growing and it's got particular ordinances in place, limited purpose annexation lets it organize things ahead of its annexation. And since they're not annexing it as a part of bringing services and getting tax dollars out of it, what they're doing is the same thing they're doing with ETJ in a sense, is ensuring that what's going on in that property meshes well with what's going on in the city, as right, along with the planning and the zoning and the health codes and such. So they annex it so that they can extend their health codes and their zoning rules over that area, but they don't provide services other than that. So what happens quite often is these areas end up getting police and fire and emergency services in that area, because that's part of the health and safety kind of thing. But they may not get city water or city sewers or city power, right? Whatever's in place will stay there. This happens an awful lot when you've got corporations building on the side of town, and the corporation, right, is important. A lot of people from that city are going to be working there. It's going to be a good thing to have there, but it needs some of those services, those health and safety services in place for the people who live around it, for the people of the city. And the city may want to make sure that, right, if this place is in an unincorporated area, right, the emergency services that will go to this corporation are going to be the county sheriff and whatever county services there are. Now, if you're in Travis County or Williamson County, those are top level, right, well-funded groups. But if you're out in the hinterland a little bit, those might be volunteer services, especially fire. They may not even have much in the way of an emergency ambulance service. And you want that company there, and it needs those services. So you might do a limited purpose annexation, push those health and safety services out there to where that company is. so that it can function well. That helps the city. The city regulates a little bit, but it's not a full-on annexation. Does that make sense? So this is kind of a special purpose thing where we've recognized a need, and the state's allowed for this to happen. It is limited to the bigger cities. Okay, so let's now talk about a different topic, still city oriented. So if you remember last time we talked about forms of city governments, and we talked about mayor council systems, and there was two of those, right? A strong and a weak mayor. We talked about a council manager system, and we talked about a commission system. And those are the way you organize, right, your county government, right, what the offices are going to be. What we're going to talk about now is how you elect people in a city to whatever form you have, right? So strong mayor system, weak mayor system, council manager system, whatever's there are multiple ways to elect people to serve in those offices. And municipal, especially in home rule cities, right? There's the choices there. There are choices there of how you do this. The one constant is that municipal elections are nonpartisan. So the folks are not running on a Republican, Libertarian, Democrat, Green platform. They're running on their individual platform as a person. But the way we elect them may differ from city to city. So we're going to talk about 4 types of elective representation, the way we elect people to represent us in whatever form of government we have. We're going to talk about an at-large representation, elections. We're going to talk about single-member district elections, cumulative elections, and proportional representation. All right, so let's jump in. Right, the first one, at-large, is can be 2 things. It can be at-large, or it can be at-large by place. So let me give you an example of what we're talking about here. Let's say you have a strong mayor system, right? And you've got 4 council members and a mayor. And as a voter, as someone that lives in the city, I'm going to go to the polls and I'm going to elect people, right? An at-large system, as a voter, I'm going to be electing, I'm going to get 5 votes. And I'm going to vote for, right, 5 different people to be on this. And usually an at-large system, the way it works with a strong mayor government is the person that gets the most votes out of the city election is the mayor. And then the next 4 folks in line become city council people, right? They serve on the city council. And if they're at large, that means they are serving the whole city, and the whole city votes for all of those places, all of those seats. So as a voter in Central Austin, if we had this system, I'd vote for 5 people, and all 5 of those people, once they got elected, would represent all of Austin. They're serving at large. And we're just taking the top 5, right? They're filled with the top 5 folks. Now, a lot of cities start off that way, and that works pretty well, especially if you're a small city, because all of these folks live in the city, and the city's small, and everybody kind of knows what's going on, and everybody knows everybody. And so just electing your 5 top vote getters, regardless of, how they get there or whatever, just take the top 5 and go. Right? They'll serve. Okay. Now, that's fine. But what happens if you get 5 people, right? You get 10 that want to run for office, and 5 of them are really popular, and they're just going to get elected again and again and again. You got no real competition between those 5 or outside those 5. So cities developed this thing called at-large by place, which means you have 5 seats, right? 4 of them are city council seats. 1 of them's a mayor seat, right? You're designating them that, right? Whereas before they were just all seats, and whoever got them, right, you're in there, and the top voter getter was the mayor. Here you're going to say seat 1 is the mayor position. Seat 2, 3, 4, and 5 are city council positions. And folks, if you're going to run for office, you, when you decide to put your name in the hat, have to say, I'm running for seat whatever. If you want to be mayor, you got to run for seat 1. If you don't want to be mayor, then, you know, if you're one of the first ones that's signing up for the election, there may be nobody running for seats 2, 3, or 4, and you got your pick and say, I'm going to run for seat 2. Now, you're still going to, if you get elected, you're elected at large. So you still represent the whole city. But what happens is, say, I want to be on the city council, but not a mayor. So I decided to run for seat 2, just because there's nobody else there. I picked number 2. And the next person comes along, wants to sign up to run for it, and they look at it and they go, oh, well, I don't want to be mayor, so I'm not going to do seat 1. And Russ there's running for seat 2, but nobody's running for seat 3, 4, or 5, so I'll pick one of those. And what, as individual folks running for office, what we're hoping is that nobody signs up to run against us, and we run unopposed and get elected. And so if only 5 people show up and they'll sign up, 1 of them wants to be mayor and 4 of them want to be council member, they'll sign up for all those seats. And if nobody else signs up, all 5 of them get elected. However, what generally happens, of course, is you pick I'm running for seat 2, somebody for 3 is there, and 4 is there, and 5 is there. There's somebody running for mayor, and number 6 comes along and says, well, I want to get elected to office. They're now going to look at all the people that have already signed up and what seat they're running for, and they're going to try and figure out who's going to be the weakest opponent, right? And so it encourages people to run against who they think are going to be the weak opponent. They're going to go, oh, seat 4, nobody knows who that is, but people know who I am. I'm going to sign up and run against them for seat 4. So now, and it all fills in, and it's election day, and I'm a city member, a city resident. I go to vote. I'm going to cast 5 votes. I'm going to look at seat 1, and I'm going to look at all the contestants for seat 1 and pick one. I'm going to look at seat 2, look at all the contestants in seat 2, if there's more than one, right, and pick one. If there's not, then I'll either vote for them or I won't, but they're going to win anyway because no one's running against them and they're going to vote for themselves, right? And I have to vote right now between the candidates that signed up for each seat. Once they all, the 5 get elected, 1 will be mayor and 4 will be city council members, and they'll represent the whole city, right? They're still at large, but they've been elected at large by a place, right? By a seat number. Does that make sense? So it changes some of the way right candidates look at their competition and choose who to run against, and that doesn't exist in just an at large, right? Everybody signs up, and the top, however many seats you get, those top number get elected. Okay, so think about what's good and bad about that kind of situation, right? In a small city, it's good. Everybody can kind of focus on the whole city. They're at large. The by place, what's good about that is it encourages some direct competition between people that are running for office. You get maybe not the same 5 people all the time because they have to compete. What's bad is partly that it's at large, right? These people represent the whole city. What if they all they all live in the same neighborhood, right? In the same city. And so they're going to be looking at using the city government to look after their neighborhood first. Are they going to look after the whole city at all? Are they going to look after, what if they all come from the same business area, right? I mean, so there's some problems, right, that maybe you don't get comprehensive coverage at an at-large or an at-large by place election system, right? Because whole parts of the city could be ignored by those folks that get elected. Now, if it's big enough that they could get voted out, it might be a problem that fixes itself, but for a while it won't. But small cities, it's easier to do this. It's there's less requirements. The odds are that with a small city, a couple thousand people, 5,000, 6,000, right? People can get their heads around looking after what's going on in the city. As cities get bigger, we tend to want to get more granular. We tend to want people to represent parts of the city to make sure for sure that all the city has somebody speaking on the council. And to do that, we move to a form of election called single member districts. Single member districts are where you take the area, the city limits, and you split it up, you draw political boundaries, and you create districts. And so someone that wants to run for office has to run for the office that represents the district they live in, right? So there's a requirement of living in your district, and you can only be elected for the district you live in. So, and Austin is like this now, right? Austin has 10 districts. So we're electing 10 people to the city council. Each one of those people that get elected represents a geographical portion of the city, right? So that ensures that at least one person on the city council comes from each geographical district in the city. How you draw those lines is important as to what you include or don't include, but all of the city of Austin is in a district somewhere, and somebody's elected from each district to represent that area. So that ensures that, right, these artificial chunks, geographical areas that we draw up in a district, there's people representing that chunk. And that's the good thing about a single member district. It doesn't guarantee that the person elected from a district is going to be good for that district, is going to pay attention to that district necessarily, and maybe not want to do something different, but at least they live in your area, and if there's big problems in your area, they probably know about it. And the only people eligible to vote for them are people in the district that they live in. So if they're not going to look after their own folks in their own district, they're probably not going to be around long, which is a good thing, right? So now what that means is it's possible by setting up a city where it's all single member districts that nobody on the city council is looking out what's good for Austin. They're looking out for what's good for Austin District 1 or Austin District 10, right? And so the single member districts can, maybe granularizes things a little too much. But it's a way that we generally have developed over time. As cities get bigger, they tend to transition from at-large to at-large by place to single member district. And then in a minute, I'll show you what the last transition is. So that's where Austin is, and that's where most of the medium to big size cities are, is the single member district design. Which matches the same way we elect people to the Texas House and the Texas Senate, and we elect people to the U.S. House, right? Well, technically the U.S. Senate too. Each state is a district, right? We elect 2 from each state. So those geographical areas are kind of the norm for how we set up representation. Now, this and the next version of elections are possibilities. But we don't use them in Texas, and they're legal. We could, but we don't. The first is called cumulative voting, which is kind of cool. Cumulative voting is, if you go back and you have an at-large or at-large by place system, right? As a voter, right, I've got 5 votes. If we had five seats on the council, right, I'd get 5 votes. But in those previous designs, I'm voting 1 vote for a person, 1 vote for a person, 5 different people. Cumulative voting says, no, we don't have to do it that way. You got 5 votes. Cast them any way you want to. So if there's one person you really, really want to get elected to city council, you can cast all 5 votes for them. If there are 2 people, you could cast 3 for one and 2 for the other, right? You can split them up. You can share your votes any way you want to. So this gives a lot of leeway to the voters to put an emphasis or to put a weight on particular candidates if they want to. So let's say you had someone running for office, and you're looking at it and you go, wow, and this never happens, but there's only one woman running for office right anymore. Used to be the case. But let's say you really wanted a woman on the city council. You could put all 5 votes for the woman. I don't know if that's a great idea, but you could do it, right? That's what cumulative voting lets you do. You can line them all up together, cast them in any combination up to the total that you have, to put a weight, to put, to kind of tip the scales on that one person. If enough people do that, you could have somebody, right, that gets elected to the city council that only maybe 15 or 20% of the city's population actually wants them there, but they really, really, really want them there, and they all use all of their votes to get them there, right? So that's kind of cool. It also means, though, that there's probably going to be more attention put on special interest and people trying to elect, right, people from a special interest perspective of what they represent, and they're going to throw all their votes that way. So it could be good, could be bad, could be in the middle on that, but it's a different way of looking at it, and each voter still gets the same impact. It's just that they can target that impact more than they could under an at-large system or at-large by place, where they have to cast one vote to a person, right, and next vote to a different person. Here they can throw them all on 1 or 2 and try to move the scales on that. Does that make sense? Kind of different idea. I don't know. It's not happening in Texas to my knowledge, but it's possible. Now we're going to kind of see. Well, no, that's a different issue. I won't confuse you with that one. Okay, so the last one we're going to look at is an election process called proportional representation. This is not used in Texas at all. First off, because we don't do partisan elections, and proportional representation depends upon, if not political parties, something very much like them, to get some partisan distinction between candidates or between the parties. But it is a system where you generally are voting for a party and their platform, not for candidates. And depending upon how many seats there are, if there's 10 seats or 50 seats or 100 seats, proportional voting will reward parties based upon how much support they get. So for those of you that have been dealing and looking at the third party problems and them not being able to get effectually in office, proportional representation helps those groups, because now instead of having to show a 20% in a previous gubernatorial election or so many thousand signatures, right, to get on the ballot, the parties get on the ballot. And if, generally speaking, if a party gets 5% of the total vote, they're going to get some representation in the government, in this case, a city government. It won't be much, but they'll get some. Their voice will be there. They will be in the conversation. And the number of seats a party gets is dependent upon the percentage of votes they get. So if your party gets 60% of the votes cast, you're going to get 60% of the seats filled with a party member from your party. And a party that gets 20% will get 20. Now, usually there's a threshold that you have to exceed to get a seat. And a lot of times that threshold is like 5%. So if your party can get a 5% or higher support level in the polls right in the election, your party's going to get some representation in government. We see this used at the nation state and the county or regional levels of a lot of Western European countries. We don't see this in the U.S. very much, and we don't see it at all in Texas, I don't think. So it's good because it gets more voices into the system. The bad thing is you got more voices into the system, and so it requires a whole lot more debate and conversation, negotiation to make decisions as a government, because you've got more parties and you've got more ideas and you're going different directions, and there's a lot broader area. Although you look at our U.S. Congress, and there's an awful broad gulf there between the parties, so maybe it's not that big a deal. But that's proportional representation. We could do something like this. It's not illegal, right? There's nothing that says you can't do this, but we don't tend to go that direction. Okay, I told you earlier we would look at a couple cities and how they do things. So here's Houston, San Antonio, Dallas, and Austin. And I've got here, right, the type of government they have and the election system that they use, right, to fill that type of system that they have. So Houston, right, anomaly that I told you about earlier, right, is they're the one biggest city in Texas, and most big cities don't use, right, they move away from the strong mayor system, a council manager system, but Houston has it. So they still have a strong mayor type of government, right, where Sylvester Turner is the governor, the mayor of Houston, and has his hands on all of the daily workings of government. But look at their city council and how they elect people. They've got a mix of electoral systems in play, right? So Houston's divided up into 9 single member districts. That's what the SM stands for, single member, which are geographical, right? So Houston's broken up into 9 geographical areas. Each one of those geographical areas, a city council person is elected out of that area that lives in that area. Then they kept 5 at-large seats, right? Not by place, just 5 at-large. So that means as a candidate, you want to run for office, you either choose to run for your single member district that you live in, or you run for an at-large position to represent the whole city of Houston. So 5 folks, right, on this 15-person city government, 5 of them are elected to represent the whole city. 9 are elected to represent geographical areas of the city. And then there's the mayor that makes your 15th, right? And the mayor is also elected at large. So the mayor has, right, you declare if you're going to run for mayor or not, or you declare if you're going to run for one of the at-large places or not, or you run for the district that you live in. So 9 folks are going to be there on the city council, very much looking after their district. 6 people, the mayor and 5 others, are going to be right on that city council looking at what's good for the city as a whole, right? So you're bringing in different perspectives that way. That's fairly unique. If you look at the other ones down here, San Antonio, Dallas, and Austin, they have single member districts, right? That they vary how many they have, right? But then they have a mayor that's elected at large, right? So the only person that is elected to represent the whole city is the mayor, right? The rest are elected from their district, and that's how they go about it. Now, if you were paying attention to this last election we had a week or so ago, right, Austin was considering, right, adding an 11th district and changing the type of our government from council manager to strong mayor, right? We were thinking about going back to that. That strong mayor proposal got voted down. It was not close. As did the proposal for an 11th district. So we didn't change. But those were on the ballot last time, right? We could have changed both of these a little bit. So that's how they kind of work out, right? Okay, so the rest of this class today, right, which is next 25 minutes or so, we're going to talk about special districts. Special districts are regional or area-specific small governments that have been allowed by the state government to be created. And they usually have a very topical focus for what they're going to be in charge of. So the quintessential special district in Texas is an independent school district. So if you look at, say, Austin Independent School District, Round Rock Independent School District, right? Leander Independent School District. If you just look at the names of them, you think they are the school districts of those cities. And they are, but they're more than that, right? Austin Independent School District goes outside the city of Austin, right? It's not bound by the city line, right? It is its own government with its own boundary. Right, I live in North Austin, but the school district I live in is Round Rock School District. So my property tax dollars support Round Rock School District, not Austin, but I live in Austin city limits, right? So these districts, these independent school districts overlap city boundaries, right? They overlap unincorporated areas because wherever you live, you need to be in a school district that tells you what school to go to, right, as a student, and where to tax to support that school district. And we elect school board members, right, to run these independent school districts. And they have, right, they run the funding and the budgeting, and they determine where to build schools and what things are needed at what schools and what the maintenance is. And of course, some of these school districts are massive and have huge budgets. And right, we elect folks that live next door to us to go run that school district and manage all that money. And it's a big responsibility. So that's the place you run into a special district right off the bat, is your school districts. Every independent school district is considered a special district, right? It's its own little government with its own little legislature. And people that live within that district elect people to that special district government to run it. And these are things that allow more targeted governmental impact, and it's local government, right? This is right. You get back to that idea about government should be close to the people. Special districts, right? They're usually pretty small. You may live in a particular water district, right? That little government's job is to look after and ensure, right, consistent water service is brought to you. Maybe the city you have doesn't do that, or you don't live in the city, and so people get together and they build a water district and they deliver that water service, but it's not by the city. And so you elect people, 3, 5, 7 people to be in charge of that water district and make sure it's working right, and that someone's there to look at contracts and hire people and do the maintenance and ensure that everybody gets water. Or a municipal utility district, right? Which is a district that's created to serve an area, a municipality, right? And it delivers maybe water and sewer and cable, right, or something like that. And it's separate and apart from the city, right? It's provided by this district, and people are elected to serve there, right? And they can. I live over by Cat Hollow, Brushy Creek area. I don't live in this district, but there's a Brushy Creek municipal utility district, right? And so that utility district is responsible for providing a lot of even those folks live in Round Rock over there, right? Their utilities are provided by this utility district. And so there's a different contracting process, there's different maintenance processes, but they elect, right, the people that are in charge of that. Even though they live in a city that provides those services, they have their own that they still have. They had it before they belonged to the city, and they kept it, right, once they became part of the city. and they have their own parks, they have their own gym and special event center, and and they're getting taxed just within that municipal utility district for all of those things that they have there. But they got a pretty nice little neighborhood going over there, right? And their neighbors are the folks that are in charge of that. They elect their neighbors to do it. So these are little elected legislative groups that, right, are exercising democracy all over the place in Texas. I mean, just there are thousands of these little districts out there. Just public utility districts, municipal utility districts, water districts, the school districts. Almost any, there are conservation districts, there are watershed districts, just all kinds of little governments that we create. And the state legislature plays a part in this, and the state law plays a part in how these things are allowed and how they come about. And you just need to know they're there, and you need to know that these are just little governments that are close to the people, that we're responsible for them, right? And you're going to get taxed if you live in those districts to provide those services. All over Texas, right? You swing a stick and you'll hit a bunch of them. So we have them because we have special issues, service problems, needs, whatever, in a geographical area. And these little district governments are ways to address that and to let the people that are living there and being affected by it be in control of it in some sense. I want to share now a little bit of a different one. This is a state, this is the LCRA, the Lower Colorado River Authority. And this is just to show you an example of a special government that goes really just as at odds with a lot of things, but it's really interesting. This impacts us. Most of us, right, don't pay attention to what's going on with LCRA, but we should. They make a lot of impact on our daily life because they impact our water and our parks and our let's see what I want to find here. I want to find this particular map first. They changed the link on me, so I can't just use that link. I meant to have this set up before class, but I got into a discussion with somebody from the previous class. Okay, so I'm going to kick out of the slides here. We're going to go over to sharing a screen, and I'm going to bring up, there we go. So this is the LCR website. They've got an interactive map that shows what they do. Let me give you a zoom in a little bit here. There we go. So here's Austin, right down here in the center. They don't have much authority in Austin, but they have a dam right there. That's the Tom Miller Dam, and here's Mansfield's Dam. And they were created, this group was created by the state legislature in the 1930s, I think. And their job was to manage the flow of water down the Colorado River. And they were given the authority to also generate stormwater protection, flooding protection, and electricity from the dams that they were going to build to do that. So these dams, right, have hydroelectric capabilities in them, right, a lot of them. You'll see here, like here's a power plant right next to one, right? So they use the dams on Mansfield Dam and a few others to have hydroelectric power. So they manage the floodwaters down the Colorado. They made these big reservoirs with dams so that they could hold water for times during drought and stuff. If you're in Austin, a lot of your water comes out of Lake Travis, right, which they're managing up here, right? And let's see if we can zoom in on that. Right, here's Mansfield Dam, right? This is your drinking water, right? For Austin is that. And they have some parks around here that they're in charge of, right? Windy Point, Hippie Hollow, right? You want to go have some time, good fun there, right? So they've got parks, they've got dams, they've got power plants, they've got other facilities. And then I'm going to get down here and I want to show you what's left. So these are electrical co-ops, right? Bluebonnet, Pedernales, right? Pedernales, Bandera. These are cooperatives that deliver power to people. So I get my power through Pedernales Electric Co-op. Pedernales Electric Co-op is a customer of the LCRA, right? So the LCRA, when they generate power from their hydroelectric dams, and they sell that power, they sell it to these co-ops. Those co-ops then resell it to us, and that's what turns our lights on. They also, and they don't have this on here, but they also have, yeah, just down here, see if I can get that to show. This is the transmission area as I back out. This kind of orangey boundary that's here now. Can y'all see that? Yeah. This is the transmission area. So they've got lines that are bringing power in to all of these places, these cities and these co-ops. They're managing the transmission lines or the power lines in a lot of these areas that go to those companies, right? So that's their transmission area. Here's the area that they're serving water to people, drinking water and agricultural water. I'm sorry, that's drinking water. Here's their agricultural water. You got to zoom in, but it's going to be, there's some small irrigation services down here. It should be, there we go. They'll say, I know they do this because these are rice farmers in these little blue areas here. A lot of you may not know that Texas grows rice, but we grow a lot. We've been growing it since the 1800s. And when LCRA was put into place, they became managers of the water that flowed downstream, right? So you're looking at, right, you can't really see it here, but let's see, can I get the watershed? Here's the watershed, right? Lower Colorado runs right down the middle of this. We'll get rid of the watershed and show you the irrigation services. There they are, right inside that watershed. Rice farmers, right? If you ever looked at a rice paddy, you know they flood those things, right, with water, and then the rice grows in the flooded water areas. So they depend upon the Colorado River to deliver flood water so that they can flood their rice paddies and generate their crops. Well, LCRA controls the flow of water and the flooding of water. So they have to intentionally flood these areas for them, which means when we're in a period of drought, we got some serious questions for LCRA. Who's going to get drinking water and who's going to get irrigation water, right? So there's the streams and stuff, and so here's the Colorado running right down the middle of it. If we can keep the watershed at the same time, there's the watershed. So all of the streams that you see inside the watershed, right, all of this that happens in here belong to LCRA authority. So we created this government, the state created this government, the LCRA, to manage water, electricity, irrigation, right, transmission of electricity, generation of electricity. Most of these people are appointed, right, but it's a government that's impacting you. So when we talk about governments you don't know about or don't think about or don't, right, this is one of the most powerful and biggest in the state, and is, you know, has a lot of influence on how government works in Texas. I just wanted to share that with you. I think it's a particularly interesting case of what government can do, and it kind of falls into the special district thing that's out of sight, out of mind a lot of times, but they have a large impact on how well our lives are going on a routine basis. Any questions about that? All right. Well, that is the last little bit I want to share. Um, so I'm done talking. Any questions, concerns before we call it a day? All right. Well, thanks for being in my class. Thanks for your questions and your time and your attention. Um, I appreciate it. I hope you learn something and uh, go out there and nail your last test. And if you take the makeup, do well on that and help me give you a good grade. I'd love to. So, Davin, are you going to hang around for a bit and we'll check out your issue with your test? Thanks, Samantha. Thanks, Riley.
I found it. For some reason, it wasn't letting me see the bottom of my screen. Thank you, though.
Okay, but you're good?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. You got all you need. That's
Yes. Thank you.
Oh, is that a puppy in the background?
That's my 3-year-old.
Oh, you're 3? I'm sorry. Didn't mean to imply that. There's a good embarrassing way to end the semester.
Oh, no. I tell him to sit and stay all the time. He doesn't listen well.
All right. Well, y'all have a good semester. Do well on your test. And, maybe I'll see you around sometime in a different class or something. Good luck, everybody.